Here we go again, around the kitchen table. We've always got to talk about things that are coming up on the radar. Every time I come into my office, I get patients that come and they're talking about vaccines, and they talk, Dr. B, are these things really important? Are these things, I really need to do these things? So I'm going to give you the 7 top myths about vaccinations that you should know. First, you should know that many people are talking about fear instead of fact. They're talking about emotion instead of evidence. And so what I want you to do when you think about vaccines, always think about the evidence. Think about the time spent developing these vaccines. And then first, before you reject any of these things, I want you to consider the disease in which they protect you from. So everything in life, when you measure the benefit versus the risk, it's so important when you do that for each vaccine. Because first, I want you to measure the disease. Go learn about the disease that it protects you from. And then after you learn about the disease, you might be more prejudiced to get the vaccine. One thing you have to remember is that many of these vaccines are developed for diseases that we don't have any cures for, that there's no treatment for. So it's so important that we recognize that there's a tool here that we can use to protect our kids. And that's our main goal, is to protect our kids. And so when we look at these vaccines, you want to first look at the disease, as I said before, and then we want to look at what type of side effects are there. Are they minimal, or are they terrible side effects? Because if you look at the disease and you see the death, destruction, morbidity, mortality associated with many of these viral infections, the vaccine comes nowhere close to that. And then we have to look at the contagiousness. Is my child in daycare? And then we have to look at what is my child's immune system like. And so if you weigh all these things together, you can see that the vaccines tend to be a lot safer than going out there and catching any of these diseases and spreading them to your loved ones and family members. And so like with COVID, this whole vaccine controversy came to the forefront. We were worried about the vaccine and that terrible things would happen with the vaccine. But the vaccine is what helped us so much so get out of the pandemic. So if you look at people around and people that you know, they either had the disease or they had the vaccine. And so that prevented from this terrible virus from continuing to mutate into more and more deadly strains that could be more prevalent in our communities. The first thing I want to talk about today is the safety of vaccines and the efficacy. Are vaccines safe? Yes, they are. They're proven safe. Are they effective? Absolutely. In fact, they're so effective that if you immunize your child against these things, it predicts a 95% predictability that child will be immune to whatever illness that you're talking about. Now, vaccines, they cause autism. That's not true either. There is no proof that's been proven through scientific means to show that autism is caused from vaccines. So if you're hearing that, please dismiss it. There was a report back in 1997 by a debunked scientist that no longer even has a license to practice medicine. So there's a lot of things when people have diseases that we don't know the cure to. There's a lot of people that get up there and say that they know the cure to it, or that they can tell you that this, and this caused them, or too many vaccines at one time, which is my next myth. Can you get too many vaccines at one time? The safety profiles of these vaccines have been proven to be extremely safe. The vaccines themselves causing morbidity and mortality is extremely low, extremely rare. People talked about another myth that says, oh, they have these terrible components in there, like thimerosal. Well, thimerosal has been removed. Mercury, formaldehyde, aluminum, other different things that they say that are in these vaccines. These things are helped to stabilize the vaccines, and they're in such minute amounts in the vaccine that they pose no threat to your child. Now, finally, I want to talk a little bit about vaccines and their effect on the community, and how sometimes we think that, oh, does my child really need to be vaccinated against that? If so many people are vaccinated, then there's this herd immunity. Well, herd immunity only works if a significant amount of the population is vaccinated against that illness. Because if they're not, then it can spread like wildfire through the unvaccinated. And so that becomes an extremely important part that we need to talk about. And so finally, I want to talk about the schedule being too aggressive. Some people say, well, the schedule's too aggressive, Doc. I don't want to give all these vaccines at one time. Can I just do one now and two later? It hasn't been studied that way. In fact, the vaccine schedule is universal. It's the same shots whether you live in Haiti, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, if you live here in the United States, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia. The same schedule has been studied over and over again to show the efficacy of these vaccines. And you don't want to delay. That's the last one. You don't want to delay vaccines. Why? Because they're timed to prevent against diseases that could take kids out when they're the youngest and most vulnerable. And so if we wait, we miss the window of opportunity of protecting our kids from these terrible diseases. So again, that's the 7 myths that I wanted to talk about tonight. And around the kitchen table, we have a lot more things to discuss. We've got a lot more questions from a lot of people. If you got more questions, please put them in the comments. I'll be glad to answer them. But these are the myths that I hear all the time in the office, and I wanted you to be aware of them. And if you have more questions, and I'm open-minded, I love to hear them. But these are the things that we've got to promote to protect our children, because in the end, it's all about protecting our children. Thank you, and good night from around the kitchen table.